yes.
We have time for a few quick questions. Do we have mics? Speak up in the meantime.
Great. Yeah, Alan, fascinating that playing on...
Speak up, John.
Playing on the ideas of ethnography as play.
Yeah.
And in comparison, you can even work on that through an MMO. Yeah. I'm just wondering if you want to expand a little bit on where that starts to not work, and where you have tensions or frictions between perhaps a mode of play that you're engaging with as an ethnographer, that perhaps can be very different from the kinds of play activities that are occurring in a game or a researching a game, or perhaps even perhaps the modalities of research work you're undertaking in fact don't work as play, or something else entirely.
I mean, there's probably at least 3 domains, 2 of which I've tried to nod to, one I didn't mention, right? So I think this issue of experimentation is something we still haven't really talked through and worked through enough. And we can see it's of course, very tempting in virtual worlds to go in and just sort of say that you're going to do all of these experimental things to push and tweak the community, which in my opinion goes against kind of heart of ethnography and the strengths of ethnography, which is about disclosure and presence and really being transparent. There's certainly also the issue of accountability and responsibility. I mean, so for me, one of the things that was really striking is, you know, when I was doing stuff on these raid teams, I couldn't kind of stand on the side. It's almost like being a sports ethnographer right on the sporting team. There's no kind of safe offside distance. You're accountable, you're responsible, you're in the thick of it. And I think there's still a lot more. I mean, ethnographers, there's, you know, long-standing debates in ethnography about things like accountability and responsibility in relations with the field sites we study. But for me, that experience really upped the ante on that conversation to think about it. The third thing that I didn't mention in here, because it's a much more complex one, it kind of runs through many of the points, is the issue of power. I mean, power is such a central thing as ethnographers we wrestle with and try to work through in the field. And, you know, power in these sites can look lots of different ways. And if you overlay it with being, for example, a player researcher, where, say, for example, you're one of these 40 people on the raid, but maybe you're also the class leader. And so you hold certain positions of power over people you're also perhaps studying. There's a whole other layer of conversation just over there. I don't know if that's... Any other? Yeah, please.
Maybe a little bit, like, in a practical sense about maybe a failure or a misstep that you had and how you then turn that into a set of insight.
Yeah, so my classic one, actually, I have to apologize because a couple people have heard me give this example before. This is not in the game space. It was in the 90s. I did most of my work on embodiment in virtual worlds, so non-gaming spaces. And I studied one of the first kind of graphic virtual worlds out there called Worlds Away. And in this world, it was a limited world, so you had 3 male bodies you could choose from. They were designated male, and 3 female. And then you could swap different kinds of heads on top of them. So as, you know, those of you who do work in virtual environments, you confront this moment where you have to say, how am I going to embody myself? And I was looking at these 6 bodies, and none of the female ones felt right. Just didn't work. So I picked what was called the medium male body, which, if you ask me, looks, aside this jacket, looks a lot like me. So I used this body, and then I plopped a female head on it, and I walked around that way for 3 months. And then, as you often do, I think, in virtual worlds research, you know, you follow your people, and if your people say we're going to have a fan meetup, you go to the fan meetup. And I went there, and I was meeting people, and they'd say, oh, we really didn't know if you were a man or a woman. We were so confused. And it was this kind of moment where I've been completely unreflective about how my performance of gender and sexuality, as it gets interwoven that way, was working. So it was this moment where I was like, oh, I have really confused these people. For some of them, it was like they kind of didn't even really want to talk to me because they didn't know who I was. Anyway, the flip productive side of it is when we all got back home and came into the world, it remained this kind of funny joke. Oh, you know, how TL did this crazy thing with their avatar. And in fact, I write about it. One evening, the joke came up, and everybody decided to run off to the body-changing machines and themselves start doing gender swapping. And then it became this very interesting, and it was great for me because I was studying embodiment at the time, so it was just rich data. But it became this way with my failure, because I'll go to ethographers do sort of say, oh my God, what am I gonna do with this? And then it kind of recouped. For me, the other interesting part of that story is it also shows how experimentation can happen in worlds, right? For me, it was a productive use of experimentation because it wasn't me going in and trying to set up little laboratory experiments to prompt people. It was an outgrowth of the natural social processes. So that's just one. I could give you many failure, but that's just one.
One more quick one. Larissa?
Thank you. Thanks for the wonderful.
Thanks for sitting through it.
I suppose one of the questions I was wondering is, can you differentiate between the difference between ethnographic approach and ethnography? Because in a sense,
One more quick one from Larissa.
I don't know if it answers you, but so I'm currently co-authoring a book on ethnography in virtual worlds with Tom Bullstorff, Bonnie Nardi, and Celia Pierce. And it wasn't until having intense conversations with anthropologists that I realized, I don't know how many anthropologists in the room. For some anthropologists, ethnography is the process of writing. And for me, as a kind of lax sociologist, perhaps, it involves a lot more. So maybe what you're hearing is me kind of splitting the difference a little bit. I think for some, there's a lot at stake in what we call ethnography and what we call ethnographic practice. I don't lump it into the writing thing. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but
so basically we need to look at the book that's coming.
well, thanks, Larissa.
Well, everyone, thank you. Thanks, Teal.
Thank you.